What if the one person you're not allowed to want is the exact person your heart won't stop choosing? Imagine walking into the most important job of your life, the one you've been working toward for years, and finding out that your new boss is her. The woman your best friend loved, the woman who still exists in every late-night conversation, every warning, every unspoken rule between you and the person you love most in the world. Now imagine she smiles at you on your very first day, and your stomach drops to the floor. That's exactly what happened to me. My name is Sara. I was 28 years old, standing in the lobby of one of the most prestigious fashion houses in Manhattan, wearing the best blazer I owned, and holding a coffee I was too nervous to drink, when my entire world rearranged itself without asking my permission. This is the story of the most impossible choice I've ever had to make. Between loyalty and longing, between the rules I promised to keep, and the feelings I couldn't keep quiet. Stay with me, because I promise you, you've never heard a love story quite like this one. Leave a comment telling me which city you're listening from, so I can see how far this beautiful story is reaching. And take the chance to subscribe to the channel, helping me reach 2,000 subscribers. I remember the exact shade of gray the Manhattan sky was that Monday morning in early October, not the soft, romantic gray of old films. This was the kind of heavy, pressing gray that sits low over the city, like it has a grudge against everyone moving beneath it. The kind of sky that tells you something is coming, even if you don't know what yet. I stood on the corner of West 57th Street and 7th Avenue with my portfolio tucked under my arm, my heart doing something between a sprint and a complete stop, and told myself for the 4th time that morning, "You've worked for this. You deserve to be here. Don't you dare fall apart on a sidewalk in Midtown." I had spent the last 6 years grinding my way through NYU's fashion program, 3 underpaid internships, and 1 particularly brutal assistant role at a boutique agency in Soho, where my boss once made me courier a single shoe across Brooklyn in a thunderstorm. I had paid my dues. I had done the work. And now, finally, I had landed a senior internship at Voss & Lane, one of the most respected names in American fashion. The kind of place where careers didn't just begin. They launched. My best friend Mia had screamed so loud when I told her that her neighbor knocked on the wall. "Mia, I need you to understand who Mia is before this story goes any further, because she is both the center of it and the reason any of it matters." Mia Castellano had been my best friend since we were 19 years old and living in the same dorm at NYU, both of us showing up to orientation wearing versions of the same vintage leather jacket, both of us too proud to admit we'd bought them at the same thrift store on St. Mark's. We recognized something in each other immediately, that particular kind of stubbornness, that hunger, that refusal to be small. We had been inseparable for nearly a decade, and Mia had a rule. It wasn't written anywhere. It didn't need to be. It lived in the space between us the way important things sometimes do, unspoken, but absolutely understood. Jordan is off limits. Jordan Voss, 28 years old, co-founder and creative director of Voss & Lane, the daughter of the company's original founder, who had taken the label from a mid-sized New York brand to a globally recognized name through sheer force of vision and relentless creative instinct. She was, by every account I had ever heard, brilliant, magnetic, demanding in the way that only people who believe deeply in what they're doing can be. She was also the woman who had broken Mia's heart 2 years ago, quietly, thoroughly, and in a way that Mia had never fully explained to me, and I had never fully pushed her on. I knew only what I could see. That Mia had loved Jordan with a particular kind of intensity she hadn't offered anyone else before or since, and that whatever happened between them had left something bruised in her that hadn't entirely healed. So when I walked through the glass doors of Voss & Lane's headquarters on West 57th that October morning and saw Jordan standing at the reception desk talking to the front staff, blonde hair pulled back into a low knot, a charcoal blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent, turning around with the exact unhurried confidence of someone who owns every room they walk into, I felt the floor do something alarming beneath my feet. She looked up. Our eyes met, and she smiled. Not a polished, professional smile. Not the kind of smile you give a new hire out of obligation. It was warm and slightly crooked and reached all the way to her eyes, and it lasted maybe 2 full seconds before she turned back to her conversation. But those 2 seconds rearranged something inside me that I didn't yet have a name for. No, I told myself firmly. Absolutely not. You are not doing this. My name had been on the internship roster for 3 months. I had done my research. I had prepared. I had known in the abstract, professional sense of the word that Jordan Voss would be my direct supervisor. What I had not known, what I had somehow, with extraordinary and self-preserving stupidity, failed to fully reckon with, was what it would feel like to actually be in the same room as her. Because Mia talked about Jordan the way you talk about weather, like a force, like something that happened to you rather than something you could prepare for. She had not been wrong. A woman from HR named Patricia, mid-40s, warm smile, the kind of efficient calm that suggested she had onboarded hundreds of anxious interns and found a genuine pleasure in it, came to collect me from the lobby and walked me through the building, with the practiced ease of someone who loved her job. She showed me the studio floors, the archive room that smelled of old fabric and possibility, the open-plan design space on the 6th floor where the creative team worked, surrounded by mood boards and fabric swatches, and the low, focused hum of people making beautiful things. She showed me my desk. It was near a window. Through the glass, Manhattan spread out below in its relentless, magnificent way. Yellow cabs and streaming pedestrians, and the distant glint of the Hudson, catching what little light the sky was offering. "Jordan will be in to brief you at 10, Patricia said, setting a welcome packet on the desk. She likes to do it personally with senior interns, just so you know. She can come across as intense, but she's fair. More than fair, actually. This team is loyal to her for a reason." "Great," I said. "That's great." It came out much too bright. Patricia gave me a small, knowing look and left me to settle in. I sat at my desk. I placed my portfolio carefully beside the keyboard. I looked out at the city. I picked up my coffee, now cold, and drank it anyway because I needed something to do with my hands. She is your boss, I told myself. She is Mia's ex. She is off limits in every possible direction. You are a professional. You are here to work. You are going to be completely, entirely fine. At exactly 10 o'clock, Jordan Voss walked through the glass door of the studio, crossed the floor with that same unhurried certainty I'd noticed in the lobby, pulled a chair from a nearby desk without asking, turned it around and sat across from me with her arms resting on the back of it and said, "So, Sara Navarro, tell me something about yourself that isn't on your resume." Her voice was lower than I expected, calm, genuinely curious, like she had all the time in the world and nowhere better to be. I looked at her. Blonde hair slightly escaped from the knot at the back of her neck, one strand falling across her cheekbone. Hazel eyes, more green than brown in the studio light. The particular kind of direct, unhurried attention that made you feel both seen and slightly off balance. And I thought, with complete and devastating clarity, I am in so much trouble. For the first 2 weeks, I was exceptional at being professional. I want you to understand the effort that went into this. Every morning, I took the 1 train from my apartment in Washington Heights down to Midtown, coffee in hand, armor fully in place, and I showed up to Voss and Lane as Sara Navarro, senior intern, ambitious professional, person who was absolutely not developing complicated feelings for her direct supervisor. I reviewed briefs. I contributed in team meetings. I organized the archive samples with a precision that Patricia described as genuinely impressive. I answered Jordan's emails within 15 minutes because I was nothing if not responsive and entirely work-focused. Jordan, for her part, was exactly what Patricia had described: intense, fair, The kind of leader who didn't waste words but made every word count, who walked through a room and saw everything, who gave feedback that was direct enough to sting and specific enough to actually help. The creative team operated around her with a fluency that came from genuine respect rather than fear, and I understood it immediately. She wasn't the kind of boss who demanded loyalty. She was the kind who earned it without seeming to try. She also, I noticed with increasing personal inconvenience, had a habit of showing up at my desk unannounced. Not in a pressuring way. In a checking-in way. Dropping a reference image beside my keyboard with a quiet, "Thought this might be useful for the Miller brief," or pausing on her way through the studio to ask what I thought about a particular fabric choice for the spring lookbook. Genuinely asking, not testing, in a way that made it clear she considered my opinion worth having. She treated me less like an intern and more like a junior colleague, which was either a sign of respect or the cruelest thing the universe had thought to arrange. By the end of the second week, I had stopped lying to myself about the fact that I looked forward to those moments. I was extremely unhappy about this development. The elevator incident happened on a Thursday. It was late, nearly 8 in the evening. The rest of the team had filtered out by 7, the way they did on Thursdays before a deadline Friday, leaving a particular kind of quiet in the studio that felt different from the silence of an empty space. More like the exhale of a building that had been holding its breath all day. I had stayed to finish the layout mock-ups for the Caldwell presentation, and I was waiting for the elevator in the building's main lobby when Jordan appeared beside me, coat over her arm, a coffee cup from the kitchen in her hand, even though it was 8 o'clock at night, which suggested she either didn't sleep or had a genuinely alarming caffeine tolerance. "You stayed late," she said. Not an accusation, more like recognition. "The Caldwell mock-ups," I said. "I wanted to get them right." She glanced at me sideways. "I know. I saw them before I left the floor. They were right." The elevator arrived. We stepped in. The doors closed. And then the elevator stopped. Not with a lurch or an alarm, just a quiet, unhurried stop about halfway between the 4th and 5th floors, as if the building had simply decided it was done for the day. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The display panel above the doors showed nothing but a blinking dash. There was a beat of silence. "Well," Jordan said. "Yeah," I agreed. She pressed the lobby button. Nothing. She pressed it again. Still nothing. She pressed the emergency call button, and a bored-sounding voice came through the intercom, informing us that building maintenance had been notified, and the wait time was approximately 45 minutes. Jordan looked at the ceiling. I looked at the floor. Then we both in unison looked at each other. And something happened that I hadn't been prepared for, which was that we both started laughing at exactly the same time. Not politely. Genuinely the way you laugh when the situation is absurd enough that fighting it seems like a waste of energy. She slid down until she was sitting on the elevator floor, coat folded beneath her, and after a moment I did the same. We sat across from each other in the small, warm quiet of the stopped elevator, and she offered me her coffee. I haven't touched it yet, I just grabbed it out of habit. And I took it because I was inexplicably charmed by the fact that she grabbed coffee out of habit at 8 in the evening. "Do you do this often?" I asked. "Stay late?" "Define often," she said. "More than 3 nights a week." She considered this with more seriousness than it deserved. "Then yes, more than 3 nights a week." "Why?" She looked at me for a moment. Hazel eyes, steady and a little amused. "Because I love what I do. Not in a way that sounds impressive at a dinner party. In the way where you get home and realize you forgot to eat lunch and you don't entirely mind." She paused. "Is that alarming?" "A little," I said honestly. "But also, I understand it. You stayed until 8 tonight. I told you. I wanted the mock-ups to be right. And if they hadn't been right yet, how long would you have stayed?" I thought about it. "Until they were." She smiled at that. The same crooked, warm smile from the lobby on my first day. The one that did the thing to my chest that I had been working very hard not to think about. We talked for the rest of the 45 minutes. About the industry, about New York in October, about the specific loneliness of being someone who cares too much about their work in a world that often mistakes that for not having a life. She told me she had grown up in this building. Not literally, but almost. Following her father through the studio on weekends when she was small. Learning what fabric felt like before she learned what it was called. I told her about the thrift store jacket from NYU orientation, about the 3 underpaid internships, about the shoe in the thunderstorm in Brooklyn. She laughed at the shoe story. Fully, unreservedly laughed. And when the elevator finally lurched back to life and the doors opened on the lobby floor and the maintenance man gave us a sheepish wave, I stepped out onto the marble with my heart doing something complicated and loud in my chest and thought, this is exactly what you cannot let happen. The rain started the moment we stepped outside. Not a polite autumn drizzle. Manhattan rain. Sudden, confident, absolutely committed. Within 30 seconds, the sidewalk was a river, and the street was chaos, and we were both standing under the building's narrow overhang, watching cabs disappear in the downpour. Jordan looked at me. I looked at Jordan. She had an umbrella. I did not. Subway? She said. 57th and 7th, I said. Same direction. She opened the umbrella. Dark green. Wide enough for 2 people if those 2 people were willing to stand close enough together that their shoulders touched. And held it out in a way that didn't feel like an invitation so much as a straightforward conclusion. We walked 3 blocks in the rain, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her through my blazer, the city roaring and glittering around us, her shoulder against mine, neither of us talking because the rain was too loud, and because some silences don't need filling. At the subway entrance, she stopped, held the umbrella steady over both of us. "Good night, Sara," she said. "Good night," I said. I went underground. I stood on the platform while the 1 train came and went and I didn't get on it, because I needed a minute. Just 1 minute, standing in the fluorescent hum of the 57th Street station, putting something carefully back in the place where it had started to slip loose. Then I got on the next train and went home and called Mia. "Hey," she said, warm and easy. "How's the job?" "It's good," I said. "It's really good. And Jordan? Is she as terrifying as I remember?" I looked out the subway window at the dark tunnel rushing past. "No," I said carefully. "Not terrifying at all. I need to tell you about Mia. Not the version of Mia that fits neatly into this story as the reason I couldn't have what I was starting to want, but the real Mia. Because she deserves that. She deserves to be fully seen before I tell you what happened next. Mia Castellano was the most genuinely good person I had ever known. And I don't mean good in the way people sometimes use it as a polite substitute for boring. I mean good the way a compass is good, reliable, oriented, pointing at something true even when everything around it is chaotic. She had grown up in a working-class Italian family in the Bronx, the oldest of 4 kids, and she had the particular brand of warmth that comes from growing up in a loud household where love was expressed through feeding people and showing up without being asked. She would drive 2 hours in traffic to help a friend move. She remembered birthdays without being reminded. She sent voice notes instead of texts because she said she didn't want her words to lose their tone. She had loved Jordan Voss for about 14 months, somewhere in the middle of our mid-20s, and the ending of that relationship had unmade something in her that she'd never fully named for me. I knew only fragments, that it had ended in late autumn, that it had been mutual in the technical sense, and devastating in every practical one, that Mia had eaten an embarrassing amount of pasta in my apartment for about 3 weeks afterward, and watched every season of a cooking competition show, and not cried in front of me once, which told me more about the depth of it than tears would have. She had never asked me not to work at Voss and Lane. She hadn't known I'd applied, and when I told her I'd gotten the position, she had been nothing but proud. a little quiet for a moment, in the way that meant she was organizing something inside herself, and then fully, genuinely proud. "Jordan runs a great team," she'd said. "You'll learn a lot." "Will you be okay?" I'd asked. "I've been okay," she said. "It was 2 years ago, Sara. But I knew Mia. And I knew that okay and over were not always the same thing." The 3rd week of October, Mia came to visit me at the apartment, and I cooked dinner, badly the way I always do, because cooking is not among my gifts. And we sat at my small kitchen table with wine and takeout from the Vietnamese place on Amsterdam that had mercifully rescued us from my attempt at pasta, and she asked me how the job was really going. I told her about the mock-ups and the Caldwell presentation and the archive room that I'd reorganized and the team, who were talented and kind and exactly the kind of people I had hoped to work with. I told her about Patricia from HR. I told her about the creative direction for the spring collection, which was extraordinary. I did not tell her about the elevator. I did not tell her about the rain. I told myself this was because there was nothing to tell, that I was editing for relevance, not for concealment, that the elevator was just an elevator, and the rain was just rain, and the way Jordan looked when she laughed was just a thing my brain had noted and filed somewhere that had nothing to do with anything. Mia watched me across the table with those dark, perceptive eyes of hers and said, "You seem happy." "I am happy," I said. "It's a great job." She nodded slowly, swirled her wine. "And Jordan? How is she to work for?" I took a breath. "She's a good boss, fair like I said. She takes the interns seriously." "She always did that," Mia said, and her voice was perfectly steady, perfectly neutral, which somehow made it worse. "She always took people seriously, even when she probably shouldn't have." There was a pause. I didn't know what it contained. I didn't want to examine it. "Are you okay?" I asked again. "Sara." She set her glass down and looked at me directly, the way Mia did when she had decided to be honest. "I love you. Jordan is part of my past. I'm not sitting here bleeding over it. But," she paused, "just be careful, okay? She's magnetic. She always was. And she's your boss. And that's its own complication even without—" She stopped again, looked at the table. "Just be careful." I heard everything she wasn't saying, and I nodded, and I meant it, and I went to bed that night absolutely certain that I had it under control. The next morning, Jordan stopped by my desk to tell me the Caldwell presentation had landed the account, and that my mock-ups had been, and I quote, "the specific thing that made them say yes," and the look on her face when she said it, like she was genuinely glad for me, not just pleased about the account, but glad for me. And I sat with that for the rest of the day like a coin I kept turning over in my pocket. I did not have it under control. The moment that broke something open happened on a Friday afternoon in the archive room. I had been cataloging sample pieces from the last decade of collections, a task that should have been straightforward, and had become instead an unexpectedly emotional experience. Because Voss and Lane's archives were essentially a textile diary of 15 years of American fashion, and every piece told a story. I was handling a beaded evening coat from the 2019 collection. Dark navy, hand-stitched, the kind of thing that took months to make and contained somewhere inside it the hours and intention of the person who created it. When Jordan walked in. She stopped when she saw me, looked at the coat in my hands, and something shifted in her face. Subtle, but there. "That's from the winter collection," she said quietly. "The last one my father worked on before he retired." I looked down at the coat, then back at her. "It's extraordinary," I said. She came closer and reached out and touched the beaded edge of the collar, not to examine it, but the way you touch something that carries memory. Her hand was close to mine, not touching, close. "He taught me that every piece you make is a conversation," she said. "With the person who will wear it, with everyone who'll ever see it. You're saying something every time." She paused. I forget that sometimes. When it gets loud and commercial and everyone's talking about metrics and market share, I come in here and I remember. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, really looked, past the blazer and the professional certainty and the reputation that preceded her everywhere, and saw someone who cared about something the way I cared about things, with their whole self, with a loyalty that ran deeper than strategy. I think, I said, and my voice came out quieter than I intended. That's probably why the people on this team would follow you anywhere. She turned and looked at me. Close, in the small archive room with its smell of old fabric and time. The afternoon light from the high window caught the escaped strand of hair across her cheekbone. Sara, she said. Just my name, nothing else. And I felt it. The exact moment something that had been carefully restrained moved past the boundary I had set for it, quiet and certain as a tide. I stepped back. Just slightly. Just enough. I should finish the catalog, I said. She looked at me for one long, readable moment, and then she nodded and said, "Of course," and left. I stood alone in the archive room, holding a beaded navy coat from 2019, and let myself understand, fully, clearly, and without any more comfortable illusions, exactly what was happening to me. Then I picked up my phone and almost called Mia, and put it back in my pocket, because what would I say? I almost made it. 4 weeks into the job, 2 weeks after the archive room, 9 days after I had sat myself down in my apartment in Washington Heights and delivered a very firm internal speech about professionalism and loyalty and the non-negotiable nature of the rules that govern best friendships. I almost made it to the end of October with everything still intact, with all the important things still in the places where I had put them. And then Mia called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice doing the thing it only did when she was trying to sound casual about something that wasn't casual at all. "So," she said, "I ran into someone today. I was on my couch with a glass of water and a brief I was supposed to be reviewing." "Who?" "Cass, from the NYU circle." A pause. "She told me something interesting." My stomach contracted. "She said she saw you and Jordan walking in the rain together last week." Another pause, under one umbrella. The brief on my lap became irrelevant. "Mia, she said you were laughing." Her voice was still careful. Careful in the precise way that people are careful when they are very close to something that might hurt them. "She said you looked..." She stopped. She said it looked like more than a boss and an intern walking in the rain. The silence between us was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. "It wasn't..." I started. "Sara." Her voice cracked on my name. Just slightly. Just enough. "Don't tell me it wasn't anything. Please, I know you too well for that." I closed my eyes. I thought about all the things I had not said over the last 4 weeks. The elevator, the coffee, the archive room, the way Jordan said my name like it meant something. "I haven't done anything," I said. "Nothing has happened." "But you wanted to." I didn't answer, because the only honest answer was the one I had been refusing to say out loud for a month, and saying it to Mia felt like the cruelest possible delivery. "Sara." Her voice was lower now, steadier, in the way that meant she was holding herself together by choice. "I need you to tell me the truth. Do you have feelings for her?" I sat in my apartment in the dark and thought about 9 days of firm internal speeches and professionalism, and the sacred code of female friendship, and the particular weight of a loyalty that had meant everything to me for a decade. And I said, "Yes." The silence that followed was long. "Okay," Mia said finally. Her voice was quiet, controlled. "Okay." "Mia, I need a minute," she said. "Okay, I need a minute." "Of course. Take all the time. I'll call you tomorrow." and she hung up. I sat with my phone in my hands in the dark for a long time, feeling the specific kind of shame that doesn't come from doing something wrong, but from the unavoidable reality of being human, from wanting things that complicate love, from the fact that the heart doesn't consult the rule book before deciding where it lands. The next morning, Jordan was waiting at my desk. She stood with her arms crossed, not in a defensive way, but in the way she did when she had something to say and was organizing how to say it. When she saw me come through the studio door, she uncrossed her arms. "I owe you an apology," she said. I stopped. "For what?" "The archive room." She looked at me directly, steady, honest, the way Jordan did everything. "I was not entirely professional, and I think I put you in a position that wasn't fair, and I'm sorry." I stood across from her at my own desk in the middle of the Vossen Lane studio and thought, this is either the most sensible thing that could happen, or it's the last thing I actually want. "You don't need to apologize," I said. "I think I do." "Jordan." I said her name for the first time like it was just a name, not a category, not a boundary, not a complicated map of everything it meant. Just a name that belonged to a person standing in front of me who had been honest enough to show me who she was. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "The archive room. What were you going to say when you said my name and stopped?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I was going to say that I think I need to be careful. Because I work for you. Because..." She paused. "Yes, that. And because I think you already know that Mia and I have a history, and I don't know what that means for..." She exhaled. "I don't know what any of this means. That's the honest answer." "Mia called me last night," I said. Jordan went still. "She found out about the rain." I watched her face. "She asked me if I had feelings for you." "What did you say?" I looked at her. Blonde hair, slightly escaped from the knot. Hazel eyes. The warm, crooked smile absent now, replaced by something more careful, more open, more real. "I told her the truth," I said. Jordan closed her eyes briefly, opened them. "How is she?" And the fact that that was her first question, not "what did she say?" Not "what does this mean for us?" but "how is she?" told me something about Jordan Voss that no reputation, no history, no elevator or rainstorm had yet managed to. "She asked for time," I said. "I'm going to give it to her." Jordan nodded slowly. "That's the right thing." "I know." I sat down at my desk, looked up at her. "But I wanted you to know that I told her the truth, because whatever this is or isn't, you deserved that I not pretend it was nothing." She looked at me for a long moment, and then she said quietly, "Thank you." She walked back to her office. I turned to my computer. The studio hummed around us, indifferent and bright, as if the morning had not just rearranged something fundamental between us. My phone buzzed at noon. "Mia." "Can we talk tonight? My place." I typed back, "I'll be there." Mia opened her apartment door in an NYU sweatshirt and bare feet, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked at me for a moment before stepping aside to let me in without saying a word. Her apartment smelled like garlic and old books, and the particular warmth of a space that is genuinely lived in. She had made pasta. Of course she had made pasta. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd eaten pasta alone for 3 weeks 2 years ago, though neither of us said that. And she poured wine, and for a while neither of us said anything. The radiator knocked. A taxi honked 6 floors below. The city continued its loud, oblivious life. "I thought about this all night," Mia said finally. Her voice was even, clear. The voice of someone who has done hard work in private so they can be honest without falling apart. "I want to be angry." I looked for a way to be angry and I couldn't find one. and that frustrated me more than the anger would have. You have every right to. Sara. She held up her hand gently. Let me finish. She wrapped both hands around her wine glass. You didn't do anything. Nothing happened. And you told me the truth the moment I asked you directly. You didn't lie. You didn't manage it. You didn't let me find out in a worse way. She paused. You've been protecting me, haven't you, this whole time? I looked at my wine. I was trying to. By not acting on it. Yes. And by trying not to feel it in the first place, I imagine. Also yes. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, a siren drifted past and faded. Jordan is... She paused, considered. Jordan is the most fully realized person I have ever been close to, which was both the best and the hardest thing about being with her. She lives entirely inside her own values. You can't move her from what she believes unless you show her a true thing she hasn't considered. She looked up at me. She sees that in you. I can tell, even from a distance. She wouldn't look twice at someone who didn't have that kind of spine. Mia, I'm not giving you permission, she said, and her voice was direct now. I want to be clear about that. This isn't me gifting you some magnanimous blessing. This is me telling you what's true. I am not in love with Jordan anymore. I was. It ended. It changed me, and I'm grateful for it, and it's done. She held my gaze. What I am is your best friend, and your best friend is telling you that being in love with someone you've decided you're not allowed to want is a very particular kind of suffering, and I don't want that for you. I felt something I'd been holding for weeks carefully release. Are you okay? I asked, for the third time, because it was still the most important question. I will be, she said. I need some time with this, to adjust to it. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't feel weird because it does. But weird isn't the same as wrong. She paused. Just don't disappear on me. Whatever happens with her. You're my best friend first. Always, I said. That is not negotiable. Good. She stood up and went to the stove and came back with 2 bowls of pasta, set one in front of me with an authority that suggested the conversation was transitioning but not ending. Now eat this. You look like you haven't eaten a real meal in a week. She wasn't wrong about that either. I went back to work the next morning with something lighter in my chest. Not resolved. Nothing was resolved. Not really, not yet. But lighter. Like a window had been opened in a room that had been sealed shut. Jordan and I didn't speak about any of it that day. Or the next. We existed in the same professional space with the same professional clarity, and underneath it a new kind of honesty that didn't need words to be real. She trusted me with more responsibility. I brought my full attention to every brief, every presentation, every creative problem she placed in front of me. We built something that was genuine and grounded and mattered separate from everything else. 3 weeks later, on a Friday evening in November when Manhattan had gone gold and cold, and the city smelled like coffee and fallen leaves, and the particular sharpness of air that knows winter is coming, Jordan knocked on the open door of the small conference room where I was finishing my notes from the day's final meeting. She stood in the doorway with her coat over her arm and said, I spoke with Mia. I looked up. When? 2 days ago. She called me. She paused. She said that she needed to tell me something and I needed to hear it. A small, careful pause. She's remarkable, Sara. I hope you know that. I know that, I said. She told me. Jordan exhaled. She told me that she thought we were good for each other. You and I. That she didn't say that lightly. And that I should stop being careful and start being honest. I set my pen down. That sounds like Mia. Yes. She came into the room, sat across from me at the small conference table, closer than was professional, not close enough to be anything other than 2 people having an honest conversation. So I'm going to be honest with you, because I think you deserve that, and because I know, that you've already been honest with me. She folded her hands on the table, steady, clear, like someone who had thought about this with care and arrived. I'm aware that this is complicated, she said. The professional piece, the Mia piece, the fact that you're under my supervision and I'd need to address that if we were going to. She paused. I spoke to HR about transferring your direct report to Marcus on the creative team. He's excellent. You'd be well mentored. It would resolve the professional conflict appropriately. I looked at her. You already spoke to HR. I like to plan things properly. And there it was, the crooked, warm smile. But I wanted to ask you first, whether any of this is something whether you want. Jordan, I said. Yes. Yes to all of it. The smile went from crooked to full, and for a moment she was just a person, not the creative director, not the formidable industry figure, not the complicated chapter in my best friend's history, just a person sitting across from me who had decided to be brave about something and had found me brave back. Okay, she said. Good. Okay, I said. We walked out of the building together into the November evening. Manhattan was all amber light and cold air, and the smell of the city doing what it does, relentless and beautiful and entirely indifferent to the smallness of any individual moment, while somehow making every individual moment feel enormous. She didn't take my hand. It was too soon for that, and we were both people who understood the value of getting things right over getting them fast. But she walked close. And when the wind picked up on 57th Street and I pulled my coat tighter, she said, without looking at me, "Next time you need an umbrella, just say so." And I laughed, the kind of laugh that starts in your chest and doesn't apologize. "Deal," I said. We walked toward the subway together through the gold November dark, and the city moved around us the way cities do, loud and indifferent and secretly in on everything. And I thought about what it means to choose something not because it's easy, but because it's true. About the particular courage it takes to be honest with the people you love about what you need, and the particular grace it takes to receive that honesty with love in return. I thought about Mia. I would call her from the train. I would call her the moment I was underground, before the signal dropped, because some things don't wait, and she was still the first person I wanted to tell. I thought about all the rules I had tried to keep, and the one I had broken by being human, and how being human hadn't destroyed any of the things that mattered. It had changed their shape. It had required hard conversations and time, and the willingness to stay in the discomfort long enough to find what was real on the other side of it. But the things that mattered were still there, still real, still worth everything. Sometimes the most wrong person in the world is exactly the right one, and sometimes, if you're brave enough and honest enough and lucky enough to be loved by people who are both, the wrong thing and the right thing turn out not to be the opposites you thought they were. They turn out to be the same door. You just have to be willing to walk through it. If you listened all the way to the end of this story, truly, sincerely, thank you. It means more than you know. Sara's story reminds us of something we sometimes forget. That loyalty and love don't have to be enemies. That having an honest conversation, even a terrifying one, is almost always braver and kinder than silence. Protect your friendships. Tell the truth. Choose the people who show you who they really are. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, if it gave you even one moment of recognition, please subscribe to the channel. There are so many more stories like this one waiting for you here. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and remember, the most important stories are the ones you're brave enough to live. God bless you. See you in the next story.